"Don't touch him," someone said, sharp and cold, "or you'll regret it for the rest of your life." The wind cut across the clearing like a blade of ice, carrying the scent of pine and something softer. Fear, maybe, or something breaking. Elena Whitmore barely heard them. Her focus was fixed on the small, trembling figure curled against the base of a frost-covered oak, no more than a few feet away. The child's breaths came shallow, uneven, like each one had to be pulled from somewhere deep inside. Snow dusted his dark hair, melting slowly against the warmth of his skin, and his fingers, too small, too still, were curled tight against his chest, as if holding onto something invisible. Elena took one cautious step forward, her worn boots crunching against the thin layer of ice beneath her feet. Behind her, the murmurs grew louder, sharper, pressing against her back like a wall she wasn't supposed to cross. "He's not ours," another voice said. "Leave it, not ours." The words settled heavily in the air, familiar in a way that made her chest tighten. That was what they had always called her, too. Not one of us. Not worth the trouble. Not strong enough to matter. Elena swallowed, her throat dry as winter bark, but she didn't stop moving. She could feel their eyes on her now, dozens of them, watching, waiting for her to remember her place. An Omega didn't step forward. An Omega didn't interfere. An Omega certainly didn't defy an order spoken in that tone. But the child made a soft sound, barely more than a whisper, and something inside her shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just a quiet, steady refusal to turn away. She dropped to her knees beside him, the cold seeping through the thin fabric of her clothes instantly, but she didn't flinch. Up close, she could see more. His skin was pale, almost glowing against the dull gray of the winter sky, and there was something strange in the way the air seemed to move around him, like heat rising off pavement in the middle of summer. Not normal. Definitely not Pac. Elena hesitated for half a second, her hand hovering just inches from his shoulder. She knew what they were thinking behind her. That she was stupid, reckless, that she didn't understand the risk. Maybe they were right. But when the child's small body shivered again, the decision made itself. Her hand lowered, gentle, careful, as if he might break under even the slightest pressure. Warm, warmer than he should have been in this cold. Her breath caught. "He's alive," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. A scoff echoed from behind her. "Not your problem." Elena's fingers tightened just slightly, enough to feel the faint rhythm beneath his skin. A heartbeat. Weak, but there. Real. "It is now." The words slipped out before she could stop them, soft but steady, and the clearing fell into a strange, heavy silence. She could feel it shift, the air thickening, tension coiling like something ready to snap. No one moved. No one spoke. And for the first time in a long time, Elena didn't look down. She didn't shrink or step back or pretend she hadn't crossed a line. Instead, she adjusted her grip, carefully lifting the child into her arms. He was lighter than she expected, fragile in a way that made her chest ache, his head falling gently against her shoulder as if he had nowhere else to go. The cold didn't matter anymore. The stairs didn't matter. The rules didn't matter. All that existed was the small, uneven rise and fall of his breathing and the quiet certainty building in her chest that leaving him here was not an option. Somewhere beyond the ring of trees, unseen and silent, a presence shifted, watching, measuring, waiting, but Elena didn't notice. Not yet. She only tightened her hold, drawing the child closer, and took a single step forward as if the world itself might try to stop her. "You do not walk away with him," a deeper voice said, low and controlled, cutting through the cold like something heavier than the wind. Elena Whitmore felt it before she fully heard it, the subtle shift in the air, the way the others instinctively stepped back without being told. Authority. Not loud, not shouted, but absolute. Her grip tightened around the child in her arms, instinct overriding thought as she turned slightly, just enough to face the direction of the voice without exposing the boy too much. A tall figure stood. At the edge of the clearing, broad-shouldered, unmoving, his presence alone enough to draw a line no one dared cross. One of the higher-ranked wolves. Not the highest, but close enough that his word carried weight. "Put him down, Elena," he continued, his tone calm, almost reasonable, which somehow made it worse. "You are overstepping." "Overstepping?" The word echoed in her mind, familiar and suffocating. That was all she had ever done, apparently. Even breathing too loudly seemed like too much for someone like her. Elena's heart pounded against her ribs, fast and uneven, but she did not move. The child's head rested against her shoulder, his faint warmth seeping through the thin fabric of her sleeve, grounding her in a way nothing else ever had. "He needs help," she said, her voice quieter than she intended, but steady enough to carry. A few feet away, someone let out a short, humorless laugh. "And since when is that your responsibility?" Another added, "You cannot even help yourself." The words landed exactly where they were meant to, sharp and precise, but they did not cut as deeply as they once would have. Not now. Not with the small, fragile weight in her arms reminding her what mattered. Elena drew in a slow breath, the cold air burning her lungs, and shifted her stance, placing one foot slightly behind the other without realizing it, as if bracing for something she could not name. "It is not about me," she said, more firmly this time. Silence followed, heavier than before, stretching across the clearing like a held breath. The man watching her tilted his head slightly, studying her with narrowed eyes, as if trying to understand something that did not fit the version of her he had already decided on. "You do not even know what that is," he said after a moment, his voice dropping lower. "That child is not from this pack. It does not belong here." Belong. The word again. Always that word. Elena swallowed, her gaze flickering down to the boy's face. Up close, she noticed something she had missed before. Faint lines, almost like patterns, shimmered just beneath his skin for a brief second, gone as quickly as they appeared, like light catching on glass. Her breath caught. This was not normal. Nothing about him was normal. A flicker of doubt crept in, quiet but persistent. Maybe they were right. Maybe this was not something she should interfere with. Maybe there were rules for a reason. But then the child shifted slightly, his fingers tightening weakly against her sleeve, as if seeking something solid to hold on to, and the doubt dissolved as quickly as it had come. Elena lifted her chin, meeting the man's gaze directly now, her eyes clearer than they had been moments before. "He is here," she said simply. "That is enough." A ripple moved through the onlookers, subtle but undeniable. Not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. There was no apology in her voice. No hesitation. Just quiet certainty. The man's expression hardened, not with anger, but with something colder. Calculation. "If you take another step," he said, each word measured, "you will be choosing consequences you cannot undo." Elena did not look away. Her arms tightened just slightly around the child, careful not to hurt him, just enough to feel that he was still there, still breathing, still real. Her heart slowed, not because she was less afraid, but because she had already made her decision. "It is just a child," she said, the words soft, almost gentle, but they landed with a weight that silenced the clearing completely. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the wind seemed to pause, as if the world itself was waiting to see what would happen next. And somewhere beyond the visible edge of the forest, hidden in shadow and stillness, a pair of silver eyes watched her with growing intensity, seeing not just what she did, but what she chose not to be. "Then you will answer for this," the man said quietly, but there was no anger in his voice, only certainty, as if the outcome had already been decided and Elena simply had not realized it yet. The words settled into the air like frost, slow and inescapable. Elena Whitmore felt them, not as a threat shouted in haste, but as something heavier, something that would follow her long after this moment ended. Her fingers curled slightly against the child's back, careful, protective, as if the act itself could shield him from whatever came next. Around her, the others began to shift, not forward, not yet, but enough that she could feel the circle tightening in a way that had nothing to do with distance and everything to do with pressure. Expectation. Judgment. The weight of rules she had never been strong enough to break before. Her breath came slower now, more controlled, each inhale deliberate, each exhale steady, as if she was teaching her body not to betray her fear. Because it was there, sharp and real beneath her ribs, but it did not move her feet. Not this time. The child stirred again, a faint movement against her shoulder, and Elena turned her head slightly, her cheek brushing against his hair. It was warmer than it should have been, almost like standing near a heater in the middle of winter, and for a brief second she closed her eyes, grounding herself in that small, fragile warmth. When she opened them again, the clearing looked different. Or maybe she did. The man watching her took a step closer, slow and deliberate, stopping just a few yards away. Close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his gaze flickered between her and the child, calculating, weighing options that did not include her being right. "You do not understand what you are holding," he said, his voice lower now, almost a warning rather than a command. Elena did not respond immediately. She looked down instead, really looked this time, her gaze tracing the faint rise and fall of the boy's chest, the way his lashes rested against his skin, too still, too quiet. And then she saw it again, that shimmer, subtle, barely there, like light moving beneath the surface of water. It flickered along his wrist, then disappeared, leaving behind nothing but the memory of something impossible. Her heart skipped, just once, sharp and sudden. This was not normal. This was something else entirely. Something she should probably step away from. Something someone stronger, someone higher ranked, someone more important should handle. That was how it was supposed to work. That was how it had always worked. Elena lifted her gaze slowly, meeting the man's eyes again, and for a moment, the world seemed to narrow down to just that space between them. "Maybe I do not," she said softly, "but I know what I see." A flicker of something crossed his expression then, brief and unreadable, gone before she could name it. "And what is that?" he asked. Elena tightened her hold just slightly, enough to feel the steady, fragile life against her, enough to remind herself why she was still standing here. "Someone who needs help," she answered. "Not a threat, not a mystery, not a problem to be removed. Just that." The simplicity of it seemed to unsettle them more than defiance ever could. A murmur rippled through the group, quieter this time, uncertain. The man exhaled slowly, his shoulders rising and falling with the controlled motion of someone choosing their next move carefully. "You are making this harder than it needs to be," he said. Elena almost smiled at that, though it never quite reached her lips. Harder for who? The thought passed through her mind, quiet and steady, but she did not speak it aloud. Instead, she shifted her weight and took another step forward. Not fast, not sudden, just enough to make it clear that she was not stopping. The reaction was immediate. A few of them moved, instinctively blocking her path, not touching her, not yet, but forming a barrier that had always been enough before. Elena stopped, not because she had been told to, but because she chose to. Her gaze moved across them, one by one, taking in the familiar faces, the same people who had watched her struggle, who had dismissed her, who had decided long ago what she was worth. And for the first time, she did not feel smaller under their eyes. She felt something else, something steadier. "Move," she said quietly. No force, no raised voice, just a word. The silence that followed was deeper than anything that had come before, stretching out, holding, as if the world itself had paused to listen. And from the shadows beyond the clearing, unseen but unmistakable, the watcher stepped one pace closer into the light, drawn not by the child in her arms, but by the unyielding strength in the woman who refused to let go. No one moved. The word lingered in the air, quiet but immovable, as if it had weight of its own. Elena Whitmore stood there with the child in her arms, her shoulders squared not in defiance, but in something steadier, something that did not need to prove itself. The wolves in front of her hesitated, their eyes flickering between her and the man behind them, waiting for a signal, for permission, for anything that would tell them how to respond to something that did not fit the order they understood. The man's gaze hardened slightly, not with anger, but with a tightening control, like someone who had expected obedience and instead found resistance where there should have been none. "You are testing limits you do not understand," he said, his voice quieter now, almost level, but carrying further than before. Elena felt the words press against her, but they did not push her back. The child shifted faintly in her arms again, a small breath brushing against her neck, and that was enough. Enough to remind her why she was still here, why she had not stepped aside when it would have been easier, safer, expected. She adjusted her hold, one hand supporting the boy more securely, her movements careful, instinctive, as if she had always known how to do this. "Move," she repeated, softer this time, but no less certain. The wolves in front of her exchanged glances, subtle and quick, uncertainty breaking through the rigid lines they usually held. It was not fear of her. It was something else. something unfamiliar. A moment passed, then another. The cold air pressed in around them, biting at exposed skin, carrying the faint rustle of branches from the edge of the forest. And then, slowly, almost reluctantly, one of them stepped aside. Just a few inches. Barely enough to notice unless you were looking for it. But Elena saw it. And that was enough. She took a step forward. No rush. No sudden movement. Just one deliberate step, her boots crunching softly against the frozen ground. The others did not stop her this time. Not immediately. The man behind them watched closely, his eyes narrowing as if trying to understand something that did not follow the rules he trusted. Elena passed the first of them, then the second, her gaze forward, not challenging, not avoiding, simply present. The space opened slowly, unevenly, like something that did not quite know how to give way. And then it happened. Not loud, not dramatic, just a shift. The air changed. It was subtle at first, like the moment before a storm when everything goes still, when even the wind seems to hold its breath. Elena felt it instantly. Her steps faltered, just slightly, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for her heart to catch in her chest. Something was different. The child in her arms stilled completely, his small body no longer trembling, as if he sensed it too. Around her, the others reacted without understanding why. Shoulders straightened, heads lowered just a fraction. A quiet, instinctive response that came from somewhere deeper than thought. Respect, or something close to it. Elena's pulse quickened again, but this time it was not fear. It was awareness. The kind that made the back of her neck prickle, that made the world feel sharper, clearer, as if something unseen had just stepped closer. She turned her head slightly, her gaze drifting toward the edge of the clearing, toward the line of trees where shadows stretched longer than they should have. And for a brief second, she thought she saw movement. Not fast, not obvious, just a presence where there had been none before. She did not know why, but she did not look away. The man who had been speaking to her took a step back without realizing it, his posture shifting in a way that had nothing to do with her anymore. His attention had moved. Everyone's had. Elena felt it ripple through the clearing, quiet and undeniable. Something, or someone, had arrived. And whatever it was, it did not need to announce itself to be known. Elena's fingers tightened gently around the child, grounding herself as the silence deepened into something almost reverent. She did not understand what was happening. Not fully, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The moment had changed. And somehow, without meaning to, she was standing at the center of it. No one announced him, yet everyone knew. The silence did not break. It deepened, settling over the clearing like a weight that pressed against every chest and slowed every breath. Elena Whitmore felt it first in her spine, a quiet awareness that made her stand straighter without thinking, as if something in her recognized a presence her mind had not yet caught up to. The wolves who had blocked her path no longer looked at her. Their gazes had shifted past her, drawn toward the same unseen point at the edge of the forest. Heads dipped, not fully, not formally, but enough to reveal instinct overriding pride. Respect, or something closer to it. Elena did not turn immediately. Her focus remained on the child in her arms, on the steady, fragile rhythm beneath her hand that had not faltered since the moment the air had changed. He was still warm, still quiet, no longer trembling as he had before, as if whatever had entered the clearing had brought with it a strange, stabilizing calm. She adjusted her hold again, her fingers careful against his back, her thumb brushing lightly against his shoulder without realizing it. Only then did she look up, and when she did, she saw him. He stood just beyond the line where shadow met light, not hidden, not revealed, simply present in a way that made everything else feel less solid. Tall, still, his posture effortless, as if he did not need to assert anything to be understood. The space around him seemed sharper, clearer, like the world itself adjusted to make room. Elena's breath caught, not from fear, not entirely, but from something harder to name. Recognition without memory. The man who had been speaking to her stepped back another inch, almost imperceptible, his earlier authority fading into something quieter, something more cautious. No one spoke. No one questioned. They did not need to. Elena's heart began to beat faster again, not wild, not panicked, but steady and strong, each pulse echoing in her ears as she met the gaze of the man now fully in the light. His eyes found her immediately. Not the child. Not the others. Her. The impact of it was immediate, like stepping into something unseen but undeniable. She held his gaze without meaning to, without thinking about what it meant or what it might cost. For a moment, the clearing disappeared. There was no crowd, no rules, no hierarchy pressing down on her. Just that look, steady and measuring, as if he was seeing something no one else had bothered to look for. Elena swallowed, the sound soft but loud in her own ears, and tightened her hold on the child slightly, grounding herself in something real. The man took a single step forward. It was not rushed. It was not dramatic. But it changed everything. The air shifted again, heavier now, but not suffocating. Controlled. Intentional. The wolves around her lowered their heads a fraction more, their silence deepening into something almost reverent. Elena felt it ripple through them, the same instinctive response she had noticed before, but stronger now, undeniable. This was not just presence. This was authority that did not need to be declared. Her breath slowed, her body stilling in response, not out of submission, but awareness. She did not step back. She did not lower her gaze. She simply stood there, the child in her arms, as the distance between them closed by a few feet. Close enough now that she could see more. The sharp lines of his face, composed and unreadable. The way he carried himself, balanced and certain, as if nothing around him could truly unsettle him. And yet his eyes remained fixed on her, not shifting, not distracted. Elena felt something stir in her chest, quiet but undeniable. Not fear. Not quite. Something steadier. Something that refused to let her look away. The child shifted again, a faint movement against her shoulder, and the man's gaze flickered downward for the briefest second before returning to her. It was subtle, but Elena saw it. Not indifference. Not dismissal. Something else. Something that made her chest tighten in a way she did not understand. The clearing remained silent, waiting, as if the next moment belonged to him alone. And for reasons she could not explain, Elena knew that whatever he said, whatever he chose, would not just decide the child's fate. It would decide hers. Why are you holding him? The question came low and calm, but it carried across the clearing with a weight that no one dared interrupt. Elena Whitmore felt it settle into her chest, not as pressure, but as focus, drawing everything down to this single moment. She did not answer immediately. Her eyes remained on his, steady despite the quiet storm moving beneath her ribs, her breath slow and controlled, as if any sudden movement might break something fragile and unseen. The child in her arms shifted slightly, a soft exhale brushing against her collarbone, and Elena instinctively adjusted her hold, one hand supporting his back, the other cradling him closer without hesitation. Only then did she speak. Because no one else did, she said. Her voice was not loud, but it did not need to be. The words landed cleanly in the silence, simple and unadorned, yet impossible to ignore. A faint ripple moved through the wolves around them, not loud enough to be called a reaction, but enough to be felt. The man standing before her did not respond right away. His gaze remained fixed on her, searching, measuring, as if weighing something far beyond the obvious. Elena held still under that look, not because she was unafraid, but because she refused to retreat from it. Her fingers curled slightly into the fabric of the child's clothing, grounding herself in something real, something she could hold on to when everything else felt uncertain. You crossed a line, the earlier man said from behind her, his voice tighter now, less certain than before. She should not. He stopped mid-sentence. Not because he chose to. Because he had to. The man in front of Elena did not turn. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The interruption ended before it could fully form, swallowed by a silence that answered more clearly than any command. Elena felt it. That shift, subtle but absolute. Authority that did not need to be explained. Her heartbeat slowed again, not from relief, but from the strange clarity settling over her. The man took another step closer, closing the distance between them to just a few feet. Close enough now that Elena could feel the warmth of his presence, not overwhelming, but steady, like standing near something powerful that had no intention of proving it. His gaze dropped briefly to the child in her arms, lingering there for a moment longer than before. Elena followed it instinctively, her own eyes softening as she looked down. The faint shimmer beneath the boy's skin appeared again, just for a second, like light caught beneath ice, then vanished. Her breath caught quietly. She did not know what it meant, but she knew it mattered. When she looked back up, his eyes were already on her again. "You chose to step forward," he said, his voice quieter now, but somehow more present, as if every word was placed with intention. "Even when you were told not to." Elena nodded once, the movement small but certain. "Yes." No explanation. No apology. Just truth. Something unreadable flickered in his expression, not doubt, not surprise, but something closer to recognition. He studied her for another second, as if confirming something only he could see. Around them, the clearing remained silent, the others still, waiting without realizing they were waiting. The cold air brushed against Elena's skin, but she barely noticed it anymore. All her attention was here, in this narrow space between them, in the quiet weight of what was unfolding. The child shifted again, a faint movement that drew both their attention at the same time. For a brief moment, their focus aligned, not on each other, but on the small life held carefully between them. Elena felt something change in that instant. Not in the clearing, not in the crowd. In him. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A shift in the way he looked, not just seeing, but acknowledging. Elena did not understand it, but she felt it. And somehow, that was enough to make her chest tighten with something unfamiliar. He straightened slightly, his posture unchanged yet somehow more defined, as if a decision had already been made and the rest of the world had yet to catch up. "No one touches him," he said. The words were simple, final. They moved through the clearing like a quiet command that did not need to be enforced. No one argued. No one questioned. The tension that had held everything in place shifted, not disappearing, but bending, reshaping around his will. Elena blinked once, her breath catching softly, not because she had been told what to do, but because she had just realized something else. Whatever this moment was, whatever line she had crossed, she was no longer standing on it alone. No one breathed too loudly after that. It was not fear that settled over the clearing, not exactly. It was something quieter, heavier, like the air itself had decided to listen. Elena Whitmore stood exactly where she was, the child still held securely against her chest, but everything inside her had shifted. Not because she had been told what to do, but because, for the first time, someone with power had not taken the choice away from her. The words still echoed in her mind, simple and absolute. No one touches him. She felt it in the way the others moved now, or rather, the way they did not. The wolves who had blocked her path earlier no longer stood as barriers. They had stepped back, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough that the space around her had opened. No one challenged her. No one questioned her. And yet, no one left either. They remained, watching, waiting, caught in the same suspended moment she was standing inside. Elena adjusted her hold slightly, careful not to wake the child fully, her fingers brushing lightly along his back in a quiet, steady motion. His breathing had changed again. Stronger now. Still soft, still fragile, but no longer fading. She noticed it immediately, the subtle difference that others might have missed. A faint warmth spread through her chest at the realization, something close to relief but not quite ready to be named. She glanced down at him, her gaze softening despite herself, and for a brief second, the rest of the world faded again. Just a child. That was all she had seen from the beginning. That was all she chose to see now. When she looked up again, he was still watching her. Not the others. Not the shifting tension around them. Her. His eyes had not left her since the moment he stepped into the clearing, and the weight of that attention settled differently now. Not as pressure. Not as something to withstand, but as something that acknowledged her presence in a way she had never experienced before. Elena felt her breath catch slightly, just for a second, before she steadied it. Again, she did not look away. She could not. Not because she was unable, but because something in her refused to. The man took another step closer, closing what little distance remained between them, stopping just outside her reach. Close enough now that she could see the subtle shift in his expression, the smallest change in the set of his jaw, the way his gaze flickered once more toward the child, and then back to her, as if confirming something that did not need to be spoken aloud. "What is your name?" he asked. The question was simple, unexpected. It landed with a different kind of weight than anything else he had said so far. Elena blinked once, surprised despite everything, her mind taking half a second longer than usual to respond. No one had asked her that here. Not like this. Not without expectation or dismissal attached to it. She swallowed softly, her grip on the child steady as she answered. Elena Whitmore. Her voice remained calm, even though her heart had begun to beat faster again, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar shape of this moment. He nodded once, a small movement, but deliberate, as if the name mattered, as if she did. Around them, the clearing remained still, but the tension had shifted again, less sharp now, more uncertain. The earlier man who had challenged her remained silent, his gaze lowered slightly, no longer pressing forward, no longer certain of where he stood in this new arrangement of power. Elena noticed it without fully meaning to, the way the balance had changed, not because of anything she had done, but because of what had been recognized. The child stirred again, a faint movement that drew her attention instantly. She looked down, her hand adjusting to support him more securely, her thumb brushing lightly against his shoulder in a quiet, soothing motion. His fingers twitched slightly against her sleeve, a small, instinctive response that made her chest tighten again, this time with something softer, something that felt like hope. When she looked back up, his gaze had not shifted. Not once. And for the first time, Elena understood something she had not allowed herself to think before. This was not just about the child anymore. The silence that followed stretched out, not empty, but full of something waiting to be spoken. And in that stillness, standing there with the child in her arms and the eyes of the most powerful man in the clearing fixed on her, Elena felt the undeniable truth settle quietly into place. Whatever came next, she was already part of it. You should give him to me. The words were not a command, but they carried something deeper than authority. Elena Whitmore felt them settle into her chest, not pushing, not forcing, but waiting. She looked at him carefully, her grip on the child instinctively tightening for a brief second before she steadied herself again. It was not refusal. It was not fear. It was something quieter, something that made her pause. The child shifted slightly against her shoulder, his breath warm and steady now, no longer fragile in the way it had been when she first found him. That change mattered. She had felt it happen. She had felt him stabilize in her arms, as if something about being held had anchored him in place. Elena's gaze dropped briefly to the boy's face, her expression softening for just a moment before she looked back up. He is not ready, she said quietly. The words surprised even her, not because they were wrong, but because she had spoken them at all. A faint murmur moved through the clearing, subtle but sharp, like a ripple across still water. No one contradicted her out loud, but the shift in attention was immediate. She had spoken again, and not just to anyone. His eyes did not harden. They did not narrow. Instead, something in them changed, almost imperceptibly, like a calculation adjusting to new information. He studied her in silence for a long second, as if measuring the truth behind her words, not just the words themselves. Elena held his gaze, steady, her breathing controlled despite the quiet tension building beneath her skin. She did not lower her eyes. She did not step back. She simply stood there, the child in her arms, waiting. You believe he is safer with you, he said at last. It was not a question. Elena nodded once. Right now, yes. The honesty in her voice did not waver. Around them, the wolves shifted again, uncertain now in a different way. This was no longer about disobedience. It was something else, something they did not have a name for. The man who had challenged her earlier glanced between them, his expression tightening, but he said nothing. Not this time. The balance had shifted too far for him to step in again. Elena felt it clearly now, the invisible line that had once defined her place no longer holding the same weight. She did not fully understand why, but she knew it was real. The child stirred again, more noticeably this time, his fingers curling weakly against her sleeve as if responding to something unseen. Elena immediately adjusted her hold, her movements gentle, careful, instinctive. Her thumb brushed lightly along his arm in a slow, soothing motion, and his breathing remained steady. She exhaled softly, the tension in her chest easing just slightly. When she looked up again, his gaze had shifted once more, not away from her, but toward the child. For the first time, Elena saw something clearer in his expression. Not just awareness, not just control, something closer to concern. It was subtle, Anyone else might have missed it, but she did not. He stepped closer, just enough that the distance between them felt almost deliberate now, as if each inch carried meaning. Elena did not move away. She stood her ground, her hold on the child steady, her eyes watching him carefully. "He is not what he appears to be," he said quietly. Elena felt the words settle into her mind, not as a warning, but as confirmation of something she had already sensed. The shimmer beneath the boy's skin, the unnatural warmth, the way the air itself seemed to respond to him. She swallowed softly, her gaze flickering down to the child for a brief second before returning to him. "I know," she said. Her voice was quieter now, but no less certain. He studied her again, longer this time, as if that answer mattered more than anything she had said before. The silence stretched between them, not empty, but full of something unspoken. Elena felt it in the way her pulse had steadied, in the way her shoulders no longer carried the same tension they had moments ago. She was still aware of everything around her, the eyes, the cold, the shifting presence of the others, but it no longer felt like something pressing her down. It felt like something she was standing inside, not beneath. The child shifted again, a faint sound escaping him, soft and unformed, and Elena instinctively drew him closer, her hand resting lightly against his back. When she looked up again, his gaze had returned to her fully, and in that moment, something settled between them. Not spoken, not declared, but understood. "Then listen carefully." His voice lowered, not in volume, but in tone, as if the words that followed were meant only for her, even though everyone in the clearing could hear them. Elena Whitmore felt the shift immediately, the way the air seemed to narrow, drawing her focus entirely to him. She did not move. She did not interrupt. The child in her arms remained still, his breathing steady, his small form resting against her, as if he had already chosen where he belonged in this moment. "If you keep him," he continued, his gaze unwavering, "you will not be able to step back from what follows." The words were not a threat. They were not a warning meant to frighten her into obedience. They were something else. A truth, offered plainly, without decoration. Elena felt them settle into her chest, heavier than anything he had said before. Not because of what they implied, but because of how certain he sounded. She swallowed softly, her fingers tightening just slightly against the fabric beneath her hand, grounding herself in something real as her mind tried to catch up. She understood what he was saying. Not fully, not in every detail, but enough. This was not just about the child. It had not been for a while now. Her gaze dropped for a brief second, drawn back to the boy's face. Up close, she could see the faint shimmer again, more clearly this time, like something beneath the surface waiting to emerge. It flickered softly along his skin, then faded, leaving behind only warmth and quiet. Her breath caught. Whatever he was, whatever he carried, it mattered more than she had first realized. Elena exhaled slowly, her shoulders rising and falling in a controlled motion, and then she looked back up. "I already did," she said. The words came out softer than his, but no less certain. A ripple moved through the clearing again, sharper this time, more noticeable. Not because she had spoken, but because of what she had chosen. There was no hesitation left in her voice. No uncertainty, just quiet resolve. His eyes did not leave hers. For a moment, he said nothing. He simply watched her, as if confirming something that had already been decided long before she understood it herself. Elena felt it in the way her pulse steadied, in the way her fear no longer pressed against her the way it had before. It was still there, but it no longer held the same power. The man who had challenged her earlier shifted again, his voice cutting through the silence, though less firmly than before. "She does not know what she is agreeing to," he said, his tone controlled but edged with something tighter. "This is not her place." Elena did not turn toward him. She did not need to. The response came before she could even consider it. "It is now." The words were simple, but they landed with a clarity that left no room for argument. The clearing went still again, the tension no longer sharp, but heavy, like something settling into place. Elena felt it in her chest, in the steady rhythm of her breathing, in the way her grip on the child had not loosened once. She had crossed the line. She knew that now, and she was not stepping back. The man in front of her moved again, not away, not back, but closer. Close enough now that there was no space left for uncertainty between them. His presence filled the moment completely, Not overwhelming, but undeniable. Elena held her ground, her gaze steady, her posture unchanged. She did not shrink. She did not look away. The child shifted again, a faint sound escaping him, soft and almost questioning. Elena's hand moved instinctively, a gentle, reassuring motion against his back, and his breathing remained calm. She felt it again then. That connection, not something she could explain, just something she knew. His gaze flickered downward once more, following the movement, lingering there for a second longer. Then before, when he looked back at her, something had changed. It was subtle, but it was there. Not distance, not indifference, something closer to decision. Then you will not face it alone, he said. The words settled into the clearing like something final, something that could not be undone. Elena blinked once, her breath catching softly, not because she had expected it, but because she had not. The meaning of it unfolded slowly, piece by piece, as the silence around them deepened once more. And in that stillness, with the child in her arms and his words echoing in her mind, Elena understood something she had not allowed herself to consider before. This was no longer just her choice. It had become his as well. The silence after his words did not fade. It settled deeper, as if the clearing itself understood that something irreversible had just taken place. Elena Whitmore stood still, the child secure in her arms, but inside her, everything shifted again, slower this time, heavier, like something anchoring into place. You will not face it alone. The words echoed in her mind, not loudly, not insistently, but with a certainty that did not leave room for doubt. She drew in a breath, steady but deeper than before, her chest rising against the small weight she carried. The child responded almost immediately, a faint movement, a soft exhale against her shoulder, as if he recognized something had changed too. Elena adjusted her hold instinctively, her hand firm yet gentle against his back, grounding both of them in the moment. Around them, the wolves remained still, but the tension had transformed. It was no longer sharp or confrontational. It had become something else entirely. A quiet acknowledgement that the balance had shifted beyond anything they could challenge. The man who had spoken earlier lowered his gaze fully now, not in defeat, but in recognition. No one stepped forward. No one questioned. Elena noticed it without looking directly. The way the space around her had opened completely now, not just physically, but in something deeper. The invisible boundaries that had always defined her place had dissolved, leaving something unfamiliar in their absence. Freedom, perhaps, or something closer to it. She swallowed softly, her eyes lifting again to meet his. He had not moved far, but the distance between them felt different now, no longer measured in steps, but in understanding. His gaze remained steady, not pressing, not demanding, simply there, as if waiting for her to realize what had already been set into motion. Elena felt her heartbeat slow, not because she was calm, but because she was certain, not of everything, not of what would come next, but of this moment, of the choice she had made and the fact that it had been seen, truly seen. The child stirred again, more noticeably this time, his fingers curling weakly against her sleeve before relaxing once more. Elena's attention shifted instantly, her hand moving in a slow, reassuring motion along his back. His warmth remained steady, his breathing even, no longer fragile, no longer fading. She exhaled quietly, relief threading through her chest in a way she did not question. When she looked back up, he was closer. Not by much, just enough to make the space between them feel intentional, deliberate. Elena did not step back. She held her ground, her posture steady, her gaze clear. There was no need to retreat now, not when everything around her had already changed. His eyes flickered once more toward the child, then back to her, and this time, there was no calculation left in them. No weighing of possibilities. Just decision. He comes with us, he said. The words were simple, but they carried through the clearing with a quiet authority that left no room for interpretation. A faint ripple moved through the wolves, but no one spoke. No one objected. The decision had already been accepted the moment he made it. Elena felt the weight of it settle into her chest, not as pressure, but as something solid. Real. She nodded once, the movement small but certain, her grip on the child steady as she shifted her stance slightly, preparing without fully realizing it. Preparing for what came next. The cold air brushed against her skin again, sharper now that the moment had moved forward, but it did not reach her the same way it had before. Something inside her had changed. Something that made the world feel less like something she had to endure and more like something she could stand within. He turned slightly then, not fully away from her, but enough to indicate movement, direction. And yet, before he took another step, his gaze returned to her one last time, holding there for just a second longer than necessary. As if confirming, as if acknowledging. Elena felt it clearly, the unspoken understanding that passed between them in that brief moment. This was no longer a question. Not for him. Not for her. The clearing remained silent as he began to move, and without hesitation, Elena followed, the child secure in her arms, stepping forward into something she could not yet see, but no longer feared. The snow gave way beneath each step with a soft, steady crunch, the sound almost rhythmic as Elena Whitmore followed just a few paces behind him, the child still held securely against her chest. The clearing fell away behind them, but she could still feel it, the weight of all those eyes lingering at her back, the silent recognition of a moment none of them would forget. And yet, with every step forward, that weight seemed to fade, replaced by something quieter, something steadier. The child shifted again, a small movement that drew her attention instantly. His breathing remained even, his warmth constant, no longer fragile, no longer uncertain. Elena adjusted her hold slightly, her hand brushing along his back in a slow, absent motion, as if reassuring herself as much as him. The forest ahead stretched wide and still, the tall pines standing like silent witnesses, their branches heavy with snow that caught the pale afternoon light. It was quieter here, away from the tension of the clearing, but not empty. There was a presence to it, subtle but unmistakable, as if the world itself was aware of what was unfolding within it. Elena's gaze lifted, following the path he had chosen without question, her steps steady despite the unfamiliar direction. She did not know where they were going. She did not know what waited ahead. But for the first time, that uncertainty did not feel like something she needed to fear. It felt like something she was walking toward willingly. He slowed slightly, just enough that she noticed, just enough that the distance between them narrowed by a step. Elena matched it without thinking, her pace adjusting naturally, her attention shifting back to him. There was no urgency in his movement. No hesitation either. Just certainty, quiet and absolute. After a few more steps, he spoke again, his voice carrying easily through the stillness of the trees. "You did not ask who he is." Elena blinked once, surprised by the question, though she did not let it show fully. Her gaze dropped briefly to the child, her expression softening as she studied his face, the faint shimmer beneath his skin flickering once more before fading. She had noticed it. Of course she had. But she had not asked. Not out loud. "I thought you would tell me if I needed to know," she said after a moment, her voice calm, honest. The answer seemed to settle into the space between them, not challenged, not dismissed. He glanced back at her then, just over his shoulder, his eyes catching hers briefly before returning forward. "Most would have asked immediately," he said. Elena considered that for a second, her grip on the child tightening slightly as she shifted him more comfortably against her shoulder. "Most would have left him there," she replied. The words were quiet, but they carried. He did not respond right away. The forest seemed to absorb the silence that followed, the only sound the steady rhythm of their steps against the frozen ground. Elena felt it again then, that subtle shift, the way the air seemed to settle differently around them, as if something unspoken had been acknowledged. The child stirred again, a soft breath escaping him, and Elena instinctively adjusted her hold, her hand moving in that same gentle, reassuring motion. His fingers curled weakly against her sleeve, then relaxed. She exhaled softly, the tension in her chest easing just slightly. When she looked up again, he had slowed once more, this time coming to a full stop. Elena stopped as well, her attention sharpening instantly, her gaze lifting to follow his. The trees ahead opened slightly, the forest thinning just enough to reveal a clearing beyond, smaller than the one they had left behind, but quieter, more secluded. The light filtered differently here, softer, as if the world had drawn a boundary around this place. He turned to face her fully then, his posture unchanged, but his presence somehow more defined in the stillness. Elena met his gaze, her own steady, her grip on the child secure. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, not empty, but full of something waiting. Then, finally, he spoke again. "He is not just any child," he said, his voice quieter now, but carrying the same weight as before. Elena felt the words settle into her chest, not as a surprise, but as confirmation of what she had already sensed. She nodded once, her expression unchanged, her voice soft but certain when she answered, "I know." And for the first time since they had left the clearing, something in his gaze shifted fully, not just recognition, not just acknowledgement, but something deeper. Something that saw her not as someone who had stumbled into this moment, but as someone who had chosen it, fully, without turning away. The quiet of the smaller clearing wrapped around them like something intentional, not empty, but held, as if the world itself had chosen to step back and leave this moment undisturbed. Elena Whitmore stood where she had stopped, the child still cradled securely against her chest, her arms steady despite the weight of everything that had led her here. The forest behind them felt distant now, the tension of the pack, the judgment, the voices, all of it fading into something that no longer had the power to reach her. The air here was different, softer, still, and yet, beneath that stillness, there was something deeper, something that made her aware that this place was not ordinary either. He watched her for a long moment, his gaze unwavering, not searching anymore, not questioning, but seeing, truly seeing. Elena felt it settle into her chest in a way she could not explain, the quiet recognition that she was no longer being measured, but acknowledged. The child stirred again, more noticeably this time, his small body shifting against her as if responding to the calm around them. Elena immediately adjusted her hold, her hand moving in that same gentle rhythm along his back, slow and steady, her thumb brushing lightly against his shoulder. His breathing remained even, his warmth constant, but something else changed. The faint shimmer beneath his skin appeared again, clearer now, like light beneath a thin layer of water, soft but unmistakable. It lingered a second longer than before fading again. Elena's breath caught quietly. She had seen it before, but not like this. Not this clearly. Her gaze remained on the child for a moment, her expression softening despite everything, her fingers tightening just slightly in a protective instinct she no longer questioned. When she looked back up, he had not moved, but something about him had. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A shift in the way he held himself, in the way his gaze settled, as if whatever he had been waiting to confirm had just been answered. "He is bound to power," he said quietly, his voice lower now, not meant for the forest, not meant for anyone else. Just her. Elena felt the words land differently this time. Not as information, as truth. Her eyes flickered back down to the child, the memory of that shimmer still lingering in her mind, the unnatural warmth, the way he had stabilized in her arms when nothing else had reached him. She swallowed softly, her heart steady despite the weight of what she was beginning to understand. "And that is why they were afraid," she said, more to herself than to him, but the words carried anyway. He did not correct her. He did not confirm it directly either, but the silence that followed said enough. Elena exhaled slowly, her shoulders easing just slightly as something inside her settled into place. She had not been wrong to step forward. Not about him. Not about any of it. The child shifted again, a soft sound escaping him, and this time his fingers moved more clearly, curling gently against her sleeve before relaxing. Elena's chest tightened, something warm spreading through her in response, something that felt dangerously close to hope. She adjusted her hold again, bringing him closer, her hand resting lightly against his back as if she could anchor him there through sheer will alone. When she looked up again, his gaze was still on her, but it had changed. There was no distance left in it now, no separation, just a quiet certainty that mirrored her own. He took a single step closer, closing what little space remained between them, stopping just within reach. Elena did not move away. She stood where she was, her posture steady, her gaze clear, the child secure in her arms. The air between them felt different now, not tense, not uncertain, but resolved, as if something had already been decided, and they were simply standing inside the result of it. His eyes flickered once more toward the child, then back to her, and when he spoke again, his voice carried something new. Not just authority, not just control, something quieter, Final. He responded to you, he said. Elena blinked once, her breath catching softly, not because she did not understand, but because she did. She had felt it. The moment his breathing had steadied, the way his warmth had settled, the way he had held on to her without even knowing he was doing it. She nodded once, slowly, her voice soft but certain when she answered. Yes. The word lingered between them, simple, but full of everything it carried. And in that moment, with the forest silent around them and the child safe in her arms, Elena understood something she had not allowed herself to name before. This had not been chance. Not for him. Not for her. The moment did not need to be announced. It unfolded quietly, the way everything had between them, without force, without spectacle, yet impossible to deny. Elena Whitmore stood in the stillness of the clearing, the child resting against her as if he had always belonged there, her arms steady, her breath even, her gaze lifted to meet his without hesitation. The world around them felt distant now, reduced to the soft whisper of wind through the trees and the faint creak of branches shifting under the weight of snow. Everything else had fallen away. Everything except this. He stepped closer, just enough that the space between them disappeared completely, not crowding, not overwhelming, simply present in a way that filled the moment entirely. Elena did not move. She did not need to. Her heart beat steadily, not fast, not uncertain, but strong, each pulse echoing the quiet certainty that had taken root inside her long before she understood what it meant. The child stirred again, his fingers curling lightly against her sleeve, his breath warm and steady against her collarbone, and Elena instinctively adjusted her hold, her hand moving in that same gentle rhythm along his back. The faint shimmer beneath the boy's skin appeared once more, softer now, like something settling rather than emerging, and for the first time, it did not feel unfamiliar. It felt right. Elena lifted her eyes again, and he was already watching her, his gaze unwavering, no longer measuring, no longer questioning. Decided. The weight of it settled into her chest, not heavy, but grounding, like something that had always been there waiting to be recognized. He raised his hand slowly, deliberately, giving her time to move if she wished, to step back if she chose. She did not. She remained where she was, her posture steady, her grip on the child unchanged. His hand stopped just short of her shoulder, hovering for the briefest second, as if marking the moment, as if acknowledging the choice that had already been made by both of them. Then, gently, he rested it there. The contact was light, controlled, but it carried something deeper than touch. Elena felt it instantly, a quiet warmth that spread from that single point, not overwhelming, not consuming, but steady, certain. Her breath caught softly, her fingers tightening just slightly around the child as something inside her shifted into place. Not new, not unfamiliar, just revealed. Around them, the forest remained silent, but the air had changed again, deeper this time, as if the world itself had acknowledged what had just happened. Elena did not look away. She could not. Not because she was unable, but because there was nothing in her that wanted to. His voice, when it came, was low, steady, carrying only as far as it needed to. From this moment, he said, his gaze locked on hers, you are under my protection. The words settled into the space between them, but they did not stop there. Elena felt them, not as something given, but as something claimed, something that reshaped the ground beneath her feet without asking permission. Her breath steadied again, her chest rising slowly as the meaning unfolded, not in fear, not in hesitation, but in something stronger. Acceptance. The child shifted once more, a soft sound escaping him, and Elena's hand moved instinctively, her touch gentle, grounding. He remained calm. Safe. She knew it without needing to question it. When she looked back up, his gaze had not moved. Not once. And in that unwavering focus, Elena understood something with a clarity that left no room for doubt. This had never been just about the child. He had seen her. From the moment she stepped forward. From the moment she refused to let go. His hand remained on her shoulder, steady, unyielding, not as a restraint, but as a promise. The forest stood witness in silence as the moment settled into something permanent, something that could not be undone. And as Elena Whitmore stood there, the child safe in her arms and the weight of his words anchoring her in place, She realized that the line she had crossed was no longer behind her. It had become the path in front of her. And this time, she was not walking it alone.